I didn't learn the truth in a fight. It wasn't a slammed door or a shattering glass. It was a soft blue light at 12:41 a.m., the kind of light that makes your kitchen look like a waiting room. Cole had fallen asleep on the couch with a throw blanket kicked halfway to the floor. I was at the table with my laptop, compiling receipts for our next appointment at the fertility clinic. I clicked into the bank portal because I couldn't find an invoice, and that's where the numbers stopped behaving like our life. Multiple transactions late at night, repeated names I didn't recognize, payment memos that didn't match restaurants or ride shares. There were cash withdrawals I couldn't square with our spreadsheets. It felt like being told a word you've used your whole life doesn't mean what you think it means. I opened a browser tab and went hunting. The names belonged to small wellness studios, one-room rentals over nail salons, cash-only massage places, addresses that existed and also didn't, depending on how hard you looked. Now my hands were cold. I checked his email. The confirmation messages were there, in a folder named Auto. The receipts were polite, euphemistic. Even the subject lines tried to whisper. And then there were the texts, private threads that bloomed when I typed his passcode and waited for the little dots to stop dancing. The tone was transactional and intimate at the same time. He asked about availability, specials, and longer sessions. He mentioned preferred days after IUI appointments. He used my medical schedule as his calendar. Keep watching. It only gets deeper. When people talk about trying for a baby, they use verbs that sound hopeful. Try, hope, pray, plan. What it really felt like was project management. Tacoma's rain stitched our days together, while I built my life around ovulation windows and blood draws. Every morning at 6, I stood in the bathroom with the basal thermometer under my tongue, and a prayer I didn't call a prayer. The kitchen counter became a pharmacy. Vitamins in glass jars, syringes in their polite paper sleeves, alcohol wipes like pocket-sized apologies. I made charts. I made lists. I made room. Cole learned to say the right things. We're in this together. Whatever it takes. He came to early appointments when he could, and squeezed my hand like it was his job. He made tea without asking, and set the mug by my laptop, a little steam drifting over insurance PDFs and lab results, with numbers I pretended to understand. We told no one, not because we were ashamed, but because we wanted to keep the future quiet until it was ready to speak. Time became a loop. Clinic waiting rooms, soft music, fake ferns, nurses who remembered my name, a doctor who used words like promising, the way a fortune teller might clear her throat. I measured success in millimeters and hormone levels. I bought a sweater one size up, a ridiculous talisman, and folded it into a drawer. Sometimes I'd take it out at night and hold it like a map I couldn't read. The first I didn't work. The second didn't either. We retreated to the kinds of comforts that make you believe you're still steering. Long walks near Point Defiance, banh mi eaten in the car while the rain needled the windshield, movies with predictable endings because I needed one thing to behave. I started waking at 3, heavy with the feeling I was forgetting something important. I would stand in the doorway and watch Cole sleep, counting his breaths. Love, anxiety, and superstition are made of the same fabric. You just fold them differently. Money, which we had always treated like a shared project, started pooling in corners. A few months earlier, we agreed to curb extras. No impulsive gadgets. No surprise weekends. IVF was on the horizon, and the horizon, it turns out, charges interest. So when I saw the withdrawals, the studio names, the timestamps parked in the shadows of our clinic visits. A different math arrived. It didn't add up to mistake. It added up to intention. I didn't wake him right away. I sat at the table and watched the screen as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into mercy. The refrigerator hummed. A bus sighed 2 blocks away. A rain gutter ticked like a metronome for some song I didn't know yet. Then I stood, walked to the couch, and touched his shoulder. "Cole," I said, "I need you to wake up, right now." He blinked, confused, then careful. "What's wrong?" I angled the laptop toward him and waited. I told myself I would not speak first. He looked, inhaled in a way that sounded like a decision, and reached for a sentence that might save him. I could see it forming, a flimsy bridge to a shore that no longer existed. Before he could set it down between us, the word arrived, plain as a bruise. "Explain." "Explain." He swallowed. "It's not, Tamsin. It's not what you think." The emergency sentence. The one that asks you to hold your breath while he rearranges the furniture inside your head. "What do I think, Cole?" My voice surprised me. Flat, like the line of a distant horizon. "That you were tipping generously? That longer session is a fundraising term?" He winced. I watched him decide between versions of himself. He chose the considerate one. "I messed up," he said. "It was a phase. I was stressed. After your appointments, I felt useless, and it spiraled. I was trying to cope. With cash?" I pointed to the totals. "And aliases. And scheduling around my IUIs like this was an after-party." He rubbed his face. It never meant anything. There it was. The discount sticker they put on betrayal. I stared at the ledger. Dates lined up with the precision I had reserved for our future. "It meant money we needed for IVF," I said. "It meant risk. It meant planning." My fingers were steady on the trackpad. "How long?" He looked at the ceiling like the truth might be written there. "A few months. Try again." "A year," he said, smaller. "On and off." The refrigerator motor shifted into a higher hum, as if the room were preparing for takeoff. I walked to the sink, ran the tap, and poured a glass of water I didn't drink. The kitchen window showed a dark slice of our street, wet asphalt, a crooked maple, the yellow blink of a crosswalk sign. I thought about every early morning I'd stood here with the thermometer, my pulse counting out a borrowed future. "Is it just massages?" I asked. I hated the word's sudden gullibility. His silence wasn't theatrical. It was arithmetic. "No," he said at last. "Not always." I nodded because my body needed something to do. "Protection?" "Yes." A beat. "Usually." I set the glass down. It made the smallest sound, like a button dropping to a hardwood floor. He reached for me across the table. "I want to fix this. I'll delete everything. I'll call someone tomorrow. A counselor. We can go together." "You'll call a counselor." I said it back to him because I needed to hear how small it was compared to what he'd built. "Do you have a problem, Cole? Is it a compulsion or convenience?" "I don't know," he said. "Both?" I feel like I lost track of who I was. Every failure at the clinic made me feel like less of a man. I hated coming home and pretending to be optimistic. He gestured, a shape that didn't exist. It numbed it. I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because grief sometimes enters through the wrong door. "You could have told me." "I was ashamed," he said. "I love you. I want a family with you." The words fell between us like feathers and bricks, soft and heavy at the same time. I could catalog the good things about Cole. His tea at midnight, the way he warmed my side of the bed in winter, The notes he left on the fridge when he left early. I could lay them out like evidence and still end up at the same verdict. Good men can harm you. Love can be adjacent to sabotage. We sat in the humming kitchen until the clock ticked into another hour. Eventually, I said, "You'll sleep in the spare room." The sentence felt like a tool, not a punishment, something for building a boundary I could live behind. "Tomorrow I'll schedule tests. For both of us." He nodded. "Whatever you want." I want the truth to stop moving. He didn't answer that. He took a blanket and his phone and walked down the hall. The house exhaled. I closed the laptop, turned off the blue light, and stood in the dim with my hands on the back of a chair. The quiet felt like a waiting room again. But this time, I wasn't sure for what. In the morning, Tacoma was rinsed clean. A gull screeched on the power line like a hinge that needed oil. I made coffee and called my OB's office. My voice sounded calm in the receptionist's ear as I asked about panels and timelines. "We can see you this afternoon," she said. Words like mercy, except they weren't. They were logistics. Cole was gentle in the daylight. He offered to drive. He texted me from the parking lot to say he was here if I needed anything, the way he used to text from job sites when a pour ran long. I let the messages sit unread while a nurse took blood and a physician asked questions without adjectives. Afterward, I walked along Ruston Way and let the wind erase my face until my skin felt like someone else's. By evening, the house had decided we were roommates. Cole cooked pasta and left a plate for me under foil. I ate standing up and tasted metal. He started a list. Numbers for therapists, addiction counselors, support groups. He handed me the paper like a peace offering. "I'll start tomorrow," he said. "You already started," I said. "When you told the truth, keep going." That night, sleep sidestepped me. I lay in the spare room because the bed I had chosen last year. Fur frame, clean lines, a promise of future mornings, felt too opinionated now. I pressed the heel of my hand to my sternum, where the panic likes to knock, and counted backwards from 100. Rain found the gutters again. Somewhere a train stitched the city together with its long iron thread. I pictured the sweater I'd folded into a drawer and felt the loss unspool. At 3, the phone lit up with an email from the clinic. Calendar updates, payment reminders, a cheerful note about financing options. The subject line was bright and helpful, the way people are when they don't know what you've lost. I archived it, then unarchived it, then archived it again. Control wasn't a solution. It was a symptom I understood. In the morning, I booked my first individual session with a therapist who could see me on Thursdays. I added Cole's group to his calendar and sent him the invite, not because I was managing him, but because systems are how I breathe. Then I wrote 3 sentences in a notebook I hadn't touched in months. 1. I'm not a failure for wanting a child. 2. I'm not a fool for trusting someone I loved. 3. The next right thing can be small. I closed the notebook and felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not even acceptance. Just a plank set down between 2 bad shores, a way to cross without drowning. Keep watching. It only gets deeper. The first Thursday with the new therapist was colder than the weather report promised. Tacoma has a way of lying like that. Clouds that look polite until they open their hands. I parked 3 blocks away from the office so I could walk, just to hear the sound of my own steps. Inside, the room was warm, over-furnished in a way that suggested safety. I sat on the couch, fingers pressed into the seams, and told a stranger that my marriage was both alive and over. She asked when I had started to notice something was wrong. My answer came in the form of a memory. It was 3 years ago, the night Cole and I decided we wanted a child. Not a maybe, not a someday, but the kind of want that rearranges the furniture in your life. We were on the balcony of our second-floor apartment, drinking cheap wine and eating crackers straight from the box. He was wearing a sweatshirt from a job he hated. I was barefoot, my toes curled against the cold metal rail. We talked about names, first joking, then serious. We talked about how we'd decorate a nursery. He said he'd build the crib himself, that our kids' first nights should be in something made by his hands. I remember thinking, this is a man I can trust to carry a future with me. The first months of trying were fun, the kind of fun that makes you think the rest of your life will be a montage. Candlelight dinners, lazy mornings. We joked about assignments. But when months passed and nothing happened, the air in the house changed. Sex became an appointment. Meals became fuel. My laughter, once easy, felt like something I had to remember to pack for the day. Back in the therapist's office, I told her that I'd been measuring my life in 2-week increments ever since. That hope and disappointment had become the twin beats of my heart, and that Cole had always been there, smiling, saying the right things, until the night the numbers in our bank account told me who he really was. "Do you want to save the marriage?" she asked. It was an honest question. I gave it an honest silence. "I don't know," I said. "I want to save myself. I don't know if those two things can happen at the same time." That night, I came home to find Cole in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing the sink like it had insulted him. The list of therapists was gone from the counter. I assumed it had moved to his phone. He looked up at me with that careful expression, part hope, part audit. "How was it?" he asked. "Hard," I said. "Good." "I've been thinking about us," he said. "About before. We used to be." He searched for the word. "Easy." I didn't tell him that easy is a dangerous nostalgia, that it erases the work we never did. Instead, I set my bag down and asked, "Do you remember the balcony?" He smiled, slow. "Yeah. I remember you stealing the last cracker. And you promising to build a crib." He looked at the floor. "I still would." It should have landed like hope. Instead, it landed like an overdue bill. We ate dinner together for the first time in days. The conversation was light, skimming the surface like water striders. But underneath, I could feel the gravity pulling us toward the deep parts. After, he reached across the table and said, "I want to tell you everything. No filters." So I listened. He told me about the first time, how it was after a fight, how he'd driven around aimlessly until neon lights and the ache in his chest pushed him inside. He told me about the relief that didn't last, the shame that came in waves, the way each return trip felt like flipping a coin he already knew was weighted. "Why didn't you stop?" I asked. He shrugged, helpless. "Because it worked for a while, until it didn't." I thought about all the ways people hurt themselves and call it coping. I thought about the months I'd spent stabbing my own skin with needles, calling it hope. Later that night, lying in the spare room, I stared at the ceiling and let the past play on a loop. The balcony, the first negative test, the doctor's hopeful smile, the sound of rain on our car roof while we ate banh mi and talked about baby names we would never use. My chest ached in that slow, unurgent way that means the damage is permanent, but survivable. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I was tired. Grief has its own weather, and mine had turned to frost. Before I fell asleep, I made myself a promise. I would keep going to therapy, keep tracking the truth, and keep my future separate from Cole's, until he proved he could hold it without breaking it. In the dark, the house felt less like a home and more like a waiting room again. But at least this time, I knew what I was waiting for. The next week was a slow shuffle between routines and ruptures. Cole and I circled each other in the house, like polite neighbors who share a fence, but not a history. There were mornings when he made coffee for both of us, placing my mug in its usual spot, like it was an offering. There were nights when we didn't speak at all. Thursday's therapy session was different. I told my therapist about the balcony again, but this time I admitted something I hadn't said out loud. I wasn't just mourning what Cole had done. I was mourning the version of myself who had believed in us without conditions. That version was gone, and she wasn't coming back. After the session, I drove to Owen Beach. The tide was low, and the sand was littered with kelp and driftwood. I walked along the waterline, letting the salt air sand down the edges of my thoughts. Somewhere between the third and fourth jetty, I realized I'd stopped checking my phone. For an hour, the world existed without his texts, his explanations, his attempts to measure my mood. It felt like oxygen. When I got home, Cole was at the table with his laptop open and a stack of papers beside him. "I booked us a couples session," he said without looking up. "Next Tuesday." I hung my coat and said nothing. "I think it could help," he continued. "They specialize in infidelity recovery. I read some of their stuff. It's about rebuilding trust." Trust. The word felt like a foreign coin, unfamiliar in my hand. "I'll go," I said, "but I'm not promising an outcome." He nodded, swallowing whatever hope he wanted to attach to that sentence. That night, I dreamed we were back on the balcony. Only this time, the railing was gone, and every time I reached for his hand, he stepped just out of reach. I woke before dawn, the sound of rain on the roof exactly like applause in an empty theater. The couples session was held in a low brick building near the university. The waiting room smelled faintly of eucalyptus. Our counselor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the posture of someone who listens for a living, asked us to tell the story from both perspectives. Cole went first. His voice was steady, almost rehearsed. He spoke about stress, about feeling inadequate, about wanting to escape the cycle of appointments and disappointments. He admitted to the secrecy, the lies, the planning. He used the phrase self-medicating. When it was my turn, I didn't look at him. I described the night I found the charges, the way my stomach dropped like an elevator missing its floor. I told her about the overlap, the appointments, the withdrawals, the precise choreography of betrayal. I kept my voice even, but my hands betrayed me, twisting the hem of my sweater. The counselor nodded thoughtfully. "Trust is built in moments," she said. "It's also broken in moments. But repair is not about erasing what happened. It's about creating enough new moments to outweigh the damage." I thought about that all the way home. Could you really stack enough good moments to outweigh a fracture? Or would the crack always run through the center, visible in the right light? That evening, Cole suggested we cook together, something we hadn't done in months. We made soup, chopping vegetables side by side, moving around each other in the narrow kitchen. It was almost pleasant, until I noticed the way his phone kept lighting up on the counter. He didn't reach for it, but the light was enough. It reminded me how quickly shadows return. Later, while he showered, I sat on the bed with his phone in my hand. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. The fact that I still wanted to check was its own verdict. The next day, my therapist asked me to write a list of what safety would look like if I stayed. Not love, not comfort, safety. I wrote, transparency, no secrets, shared finances, mutual effort and treatment, and space for me to decide without pressure. Then I realized something. The last item contradicted the first four. Because if I needed space to decide, it meant I didn't feel safe yet. That night, I told Cole I would be staying in the spare room indefinitely. His face fell, but he didn't argue. "I'll keep doing the work," he said. "Do it for you," I replied, "not for me." The house was quiet after that, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, but necessary. Somewhere deep down, I knew we were heading toward a point where the road would split for good. I didn't know which way I'd go yet, but I knew I'd recognize the moment when it came. 2 weeks passed, like a series of half-finished sentences. We spoke when necessary, about bills, appointments, the weather, but the connective tissue of our life was gone. I kept going to therapy, ticking off Thursdays like mile markers on an unplanned road trip. Cole attended his groups, came home with pamphlets and new phrases, words like accountability and boundaries, as if vocabulary alone could rebuild a bridge. One rainy Saturday, I drove to the market by myself. It was the kind of rain that soaks you in the time it takes to cross the street, but I welcomed it. The stalls smelled of damp wood and citrus. I bought tulips for the kitchen table. Not for him, not for us, but because the room needed something living. Back at the house, I placed them in a jar and watched the petals tremble in the draft from the window. Cole came in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. "Nice flowers," he said. "They're mine," I replied, and the way his mouth tightened told me he heard what I meant. The following Tuesday, we had another couples session. The counselor asked us to name one thing we appreciated about each other that week. Cole said he admired my discipline, how I kept going, even now. I said I appreciated that he'd started doing the laundry without being asked. It felt small, but small was what we had. Then she asked the harder question, "What's one thing you still can't forgive?" Cole hesitated. "I can't forgive myself for how much I hurt her," he said. I answered without pause. "I can't forgive you for planning it, for fitting it into our life like it was just another errand." Silence followed, heavy, but honest. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the living room with the lights off. The rain was back, tapping the windows like someone trying to get in. I thought about the first time I saw Cole, at a friend's barbecue, flipping burgers like it was an art form, his laugh rising above the music. I thought about how easy it had been to fall for him, how safe it had felt. The memory was like a photograph that had been left out in the sun too long, faded, edges curling. On Thursday, my therapist asked if I'd considered what leaving would look like. I told her I had, in flashes, packing the house into boxes, changing my name back, finding a smaller apartment with light in the mornings. But the thought of starting over felt like staring at a blank page without knowing the first word. That weekend, we were invited to a small dinner at friends' house, people who didn't know what had happened. We agreed to go, not out of joy, but to prove we could still exist in the same room. The night was almost easy. Wine, laughter, a fire crackling in the fireplace. but halfway through dessert, someone asked when we were going to make them an aunt and uncle. Cole froze. I felt the blood drain from my face. I smiled politely and said, "We're working on it." On the drive home, we didn't speak. The wipers kept time on the windshield, a slow, relentless beat. Back at the house, Cole turned to me in the kitchen. "I hate that question," he said. "I hate that I can't answer it without lying," I replied. We stood there, the hum of the refrigerator between us, until he finally said, "Do you think there's a version of this where we make it?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the tulips, already starting to fade, and said, "I think there's a version where we survive, but that's not the same thing." That night, I dreamt of packing. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, each one labeled in thick black marker. Trust, hope, future. All of them taped shut, impossible to open without tearing something. When I woke, the sky was a pale, indifferent gray. Cole was in the kitchen making coffee. He handed me a mug and said, "We should talk tonight." I nodded, feeling the shift in the air. Whatever was coming, it was close. Next part will be the final one. We didn't speak much that day. It was as if both of us were saving our voices for the conversation we knew was coming. The air in the house felt thick, like the pause before a storm. That evening, we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had first opened the bank statements, the same table where we'd once made lists of baby names and argued about curtain colors. Cole had brewed tea. The steam rose between us like something trying to disappear. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what rebuilding would mean, about what it would cost us." I nodded. "Me too." He looked tired, but not defeated. "I want to fight for us, Tamsin, but I know wanting isn't enough. I know you need more than promises." "I need proof," I said softly. "And not just for a while, for as long as we're in each other's lives." He reached across the table, but stopped halfway, his hand resting on the wood. "I can do the work," he said, "but I also need to know if you want to meet me in the middle." I thought about the past months, about therapy sessions that left me wrung out, about his group meetings, about the quiet dinners and the harder silences. I thought about the version of myself on the balcony 3 years ago, toes curled against the rail, believing we could build anything. "I can meet you there," I said, "but it's not the middle. It's a new place entirely, and we build it from scratch." Something in his face eased, not joy, not relief, but a steadiness that hadn't been there in a long time. "Then let's try." The weeks that followed weren't miraculous. There were still long shadows in the mornings, still moments when I caught my breath for no reason. But there were also new things, small rituals we hadn't shared before. Evening walks without our phones, honest check-ins without defensiveness, laughter that came quietly, like a shy guest at the door. We didn't rush the baby conversation. That was a wound we both knew needed more time. Instead, we learned to live in the space we had, to care for it as if it were something fragile and worth protecting. One Sunday in late spring, we drove to Owen Beach again. The tide was out, and the sand was warm underfoot. Cole found a piece of driftwood shaped like a heart and handed it to me without a word. I didn't know if it was a promise or just a moment, but for the first time in a long time, that was enough. We walked back to the car in easy silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but the kind that comes when you've said everything important and can simply be. Life after betrayal isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding what you'll carry forward. I chose to carry the parts of us that still felt alive, and to let the rest sink into the tide. If you've ever stood at a crossroads like this, you know it's not about one big choice. It's about choosing, again and again, to tend to what matters. And sometimes, that's enough to make something grow. If this story touched something in you, if you've known the weight of keeping a promise, or the work of mending one, give this video a like. And if you want to hear more stories about love, loss, and the ways we find our way back, subscribe. I share these not just to tell them, but to remind us we're not alone in the work of holding on, or in the courage it takes to let go when we must.